Intro please, Edward.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Cave Boys. We're all so glad you're here again.
Indeed.
Especially since we missed a week.
Oh, we did, boys. We did.
We've let you down.
Yeah, we were very busy doing lots of very important things, weren't we?
Yes, such as drinking beer.
Priorities, really.
Adam was very busy side questing
Yep.
in the Scottish Highlands,
Yes.
I believe.
We can insert a clip here.
Oh, look at that.
Oh,
Look at the view.
Very
whoa,
nice.
Whoa.
And what was I doing? Oh yeah, I was moving furniture.
Oh, lovely.
Exciting.
It's been a week of side questing, so we do apologise for missing this week's video, but we're back at it again, aren't we, Edward?
Yes, of course, and today we're talking about the best art style in a Zelda game. The interesting thing here is that Zelda games have very different art styles.
You don't say. You don't say.
Adam, would you like to start first? Would you like to tell us which game you think has the best art style, in your opinion?
Of course, we will set the tone very early with the one and only predictable part, I hope. If you couldn't already see it coming, Twilight Princess has the best art style, in my opinion.
Everyone's going to be so pissed off at us.
Mate, the time that it's that Adam is the first one to go.
We literally can't go a single video. But the thing, no, this is different though, because I don't think we haven't really talked about the Twilight Princess.
Yeah, this is different. We're not
Please,
bringing it up for the sake of bringing it up. This is a valid argument here to bring this one up. But yeah, for me, it has to be said, Twilight Princess for me is the best style. There's definitely styles that are up there with it, but for me it's the best. And honestly, I think the art style of Twilight Princess is one of its strongest assets because of the entire vibe of that game and trying to capture the feelings, particularly with the sort of aesthetic glow the game has a lot of the time. Whether you're in the light world, the dark world, I feel like the art style is very suited to both of them and it doesn't really lose the vibe at all. And I think the art style sort of ties that together. Would it be right in saying it's a sort of stylized realism? Is that the sort of consensus we'd call it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And in some ways, I think it actually reminds me a little bit of the Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom style. Not visually, but just in the sense that it's stylized realism that just really works for those games. We often say with Breath of the Wild that its art style's a little bit too perfect for it almost, that where do you go from here? That's sort of how I feel about Twilight Princess. I feel like there's nothing different they could have done to make that any better. I feel like it really, really suits the game. I will say this, in the HD remake, some things look a little bit weird, particularly people's faces. I'm going to call it Elia here. Elia's face is an absolute monstrosity in the HD remake.
A travesty.
That aside, I do think it really works well. And like I was saying with the whole dark and light side of the game, I feel like the art style really holds both of them together really well, capturing both sides of the game. For me, it's just downright perfection. It's not too realistic. It's not too much on the cartoony side. It's perfect.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's based within reality, but it's a bit of a caricature.
Exactly, yeah.
I think one thing that Zelda games tend to get right is definitely which art style fits which game.
I think that also Twilight Princess was the first, at least mainline Zelda game, to really lean away from colour. The very first game, very colourful. The second, quite so. Link to the Past was very vibrant. Ocarina of Time, again, super saturated, very colourful. Same with Majora's Mask. Obviously, Wind Waker, off the charts when it comes to vibrant colour. And then Twilight Princess got very washed out colours. It was definitely a bit of a culture shock.
Definitely. I think, yeah, Twilight...
I don't know if the people at home won't hear the ambulance going past because I will be cutting it out of the audio track, but we're currently listening to Scottish traffic at the moment.
Scottish ambience.
Twilight Princess, for all of its amazing points. No, for all
we're
of
still
its...
talking about Twilight Princess.
No.
He's also talking about Twilight Princess.
No, you know what? We should definitely move on. It was hard for me to not go with Twilight Princess this time. And do you know what? I think it's a good segue into my art style and which game I picked today.
Okay, let's hear it.
Do you know what, Ed? I don't actually know where you've gone because the only thing we said before this video was, I said maybe we should tell each other what we're doing so we don't do the same game. I said what I was doing, Adam said what he was doing, and then obviously Ed knew that whatever he was doing wasn't what we were doing, but we don't know what he's doing. What would Ed have gone for? Ed will have gone for Link's crossbow training because it's basically Twilight Princess.
Oh man, that's such a good joke. I should have done that. No, I went for Skyward Sword.
Okay, interesting.
To be honest, I don't think that this is my favourite art style because I knew that was going to be taken, and I I didn't want the backlash for picking Twilight Princess. Yeah, so this isn't an all-out I love this art style the most, but I think it should be in the conversation. I think a lot of people don't give Skyward Sword's art style the props that I kind of think it deserves. On a thematic level, it completely fits the game. People say it's kind of a mix between, like Twilight Princess, of course, and Wind Waker. It's a middle of the road, but not quite as middle of the road as a Breath of the Wild or a Tears of the Kingdom. That mix, I don't think that's inherently wrong. But Skyward Sword's watercolour art style fits the subject matter ridiculously well. Watercolour is an art form going back a long, long time ago, but modern watercolour painting is much more recent, in the last couple of hundred years. For the modern style, it doesn't go back that far. And that's the interesting thing. Skyward Sword has this, obviously, the theme of going back in time. The whole marketing angle was going back to the very start of the timeline, right? I think going watercolour and going for the almost like the swishes of brushes around like the sky and stuff like that, and even so far as going to Farron Woods, and a lot of what you'll be seeing is just brush strokes.
I think watercolours also, it's quite a romantic art style.
Yeah.
Whenever you see watercolour, it's often quite romantic. It's often colourful, but because of the actual water itself, it's slightly washed out, and it does give you that sort of a time, of a past time feeling. It's somewhat nostalgic, and like you said, that does make sense when you're going back to what is canonically the very first game in the series. That's actually quite a clever analogy you got there.
Thank you. I am quite clever sometimes. My brain big. Do I like, if I'm being completely honest, this kind of art style compared to a Twilight Princess or even a Wind Waker?
He said the thing.
Not really. I don't really like the art style as much as Wind Waker or Twilight Princess, because they're so striking, Wind Waker's got such a nice, easy to understand theme. But I will say, I think that the watercolour art style is a lot more distinct when you really take a second and have a look. Whereas, cell shading is cell shading, and realism
so more the
is
colour
realism.
than the actual
exactly.
physical design.
Yeah. So you know what? I think that's most of my argument. I think on a thematic level it works so well. And even though it's not my favourite art style, or even close to my favourite game in the series, I think that it's definitely worth a mention because of how well the art style fits the subject matter. And last point on this, actually, going back to what Johnny said about how watercolour is quite romantic. What you're trying to do the whole game, you're trying to save Zelda, like any Zelda game. But it's also the Zelda game where ZINK is probably the most prominent, apart from maybe Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, if you really want to try it. But,
that's true, actually.
And I mean, there's even a song in that game called Romance.
I was going to say, exactly.
Lovely. Yeah.
It all comes full circle when you've got a big brain, like a cave boy. I don't think anyone objects to Skyward Sword's art style as much as I think a lot of people's problem with Skyward Sword was the fact that it wasn't distinct. It sat on the fence a bit too much. It was a bit too, it lent from everything else and didn't feel like its own thing. It felt like an amalgam of lots of different things, and therefore didn't feel like its own individual thing. I think a lot of people didn't like that it sat on the fence, but I don't think I've ever heard anyone say it's ugly. I just can't bear to look at it. Like, it's a terrible style.
It's just a nice middle range.
Yeah, it falls into that same category as like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, where it's like, it's please all and inoffensive. That's both a good thing and a bad thing. It's good because obviously everyone's happy, but it's not pushing anything. It's not experimental. The Zelda team must be wondering, what on earth did these Zelda fans want? Because obviously, Wind Waker rocked the boat, and they weren't happy about that. And then, so they released Skyward Sword, two games later, and then people are like, it's not rocking the boat enough. So they must be like, what do we do? What do you want?
What do you guys want?
Over the GameCube era especially, they really went for art styles that really pick at your brain. Bang, here's realism. But then a game before, bang, you are in a Pixar movie.
I think that console, hardware limitations, often breed better art styles, if I'm honest, because when you're limited, you have to min-max everything that you've got, whereas when everything's already maxed, graphic fidelity and engines can do pretty much anything these days. You can get pretty much anything on screen, so now creators have this endless possibility of what they can depict on a screen. You know what I mean? Often having endless choice is worse than having the choice between one or two things. When your choices are limited, you tend to make more assertive decisions. And that's why the older games have more distinct art styles, I think, and that's when you get to the newer games like, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, maybe even Hyrule Warriors. You have a lack of direction. They're not ugly, they're not bad to look at, but there's just no exact direction within the art style.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I definitely get that, yeah. And you know what? I think that leads quite nicely. Johnny, would you like to tell us which game you would like to talk about?
I like to be a bit cheeky, and be a little more interpretive with the assignments that we're given. And so today, rather than sit here and talk about one game and why I like that one style, I thought instead what I'll do is I'll take a look at every single Zelda game and give you 1 point or one interesting anecdote about each of those games pertaining to its art style. So sit back, enjoy. I'll take you through the entire Zelda game catalogue, spin-offs and all, in roughly chronological release order, whilst I give you an interesting anecdote about each. I'm going to need a deep breath for this one, so here goes. Okay. Starting back at the beginning, obviously, in 1986 with the release of the original Legend of Zelda, though it was the epicenter of the series. A lot of people either play the game or watch the Let's Play, and all they see is a very primitive game, subject to a lot of limitations, ignoring the physical art that was actually released alongside the game. Some might think that A Link to the Past or Ocarina of Time were the first to begin comprehensively defining the look of Zelda as a series, but they hit it strong right out of the gate with the first game. If you look at the physical art they released with it, they perfectly they'd already got that perfect balance between serious and goofy. The green tunic, the big-eyed monsters, the sprawling natural landscapes, the temple. If you actually go back and look at the art rather than just the game itself, it's all there right from the beginning. And though Zelda 1 might get credit, the credit it deserves culturally, it definitely doesn't get nearly enough credit for the foundations it laid artistically. Next up, we've got Zelda 2, Adventure of Link, released in 1987. It is one of the least liked and least played mainline games in the series, and although I enjoy it, it was an important lesson for the Zelda team, and that was that you can push boundaries with each subsequent release of the Zelda series, but maybe don't try and push all of them all at once. It's certainly not the best looking game in the series either. So the only artistic merit that I could muster to award it is the fact that it features probably one of the best looking title cards in the series.
Yeah.
That's a big reach, and arguably that is a catfish as well, but that's one of the best looking title cards, maybe not one of the best playing games, but that is a discussion for another day, because we're moving on to 1991 for the release of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and this is where everything started to go right for the franchise. This is where the art, music, mechanics all fell into place to form what I would argue is technically the best mainline Zelda game. The jump to 16-bit was fully utilised. It introduced vibrant colour to the world of Hyrule, and what is possibly the most timeless art style in the series. I've heard plenty of people call Ocarina of Time ugly. I've heard plenty of people object. I don't know about you boys. I've heard people object to the Toon Link, Wind Waker, Minish Cap style.
Oh yeah.
Gotcha. Zelda. I've even heard a decent amount of dissent pertaining to the art style of the latest games in the series. Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. But I have never, in all my time on the forums, on ZeldaTube, I have never once heard someone say, Link to the Past is just categorically ugly. Yeah. It's a terrible game, I can't look at it, it's ugly. I'd argue that it is one of the most timeless. Moving forward to 1993, the release of The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. That was indeed the first handheld Zelda game, but due to the hardware limitations of the Game Boy and the adherence to the previous game's art style, that being Link to the Past, it was basically an uglified version of Link to the Past, art style-wise. Anyway, the critique can also be levelled at the 1998 re-release, or release of the Link's Awakening DX, which was like a remaking of Link's Awakening with colour this time. But again, it still just looked like an uglified Link to the Past, even 5 years later. In 2019, the 3D remake, however, did bring the macro Play-Doh art style to the table that has since been embraced by Echoes of Wisdom. I don't know about you boys, I'd say that the 3D remake art style was universally more liked by the Zelda fans than the original Link's Awakening art style was.
Definitely.
I'd hope so, yes.
I don't think that's a hot take.
Nah.
I think that's safe to say. And then, of course, with the release of the N64, so too arrived the most common answer to the question, what is the best Zelda game of all time, 1998's Ocarina of Time, of course, which may be considered by quite a few people actually to be ugly. Obviously it is a product of its time, but it cemented design choices that have remained since its release. The shift from belligerent to elegant Zora, for example. The more mature Link design. Other than Wind Waker, that mature Link design informed the appearance of Link in every single mainline game after the fact. Like I say, I think that, Toon Link is the only one that you couldn't say derived from Ocarina of Time's Link. It falls in a similar category to Link to the Past, and that is that, Ocarina of Time can be credited with many series staples. Things that have ran throughout the series since their inception. They've proved their timelessness when it comes to design. And with the arrival of the new millennium, the Zelda team delivered what could be dubbed as the best Zelda game made in the least amount of time.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
2000's Majora's Mask. Though it technically shares the same art style as Ocarina of Time, it is a great example of how a game can be recycled into something familiar, yet equally excellent. A lesson that the Zelda team could have arguably applied more liberally to the production of Tears of the Kingdom, maybe. I'm now firing shots at some of the slightly newer games, but there we are. On to 2001, and what I consider to be probably the ugliest Zelda games. Adam, I'm sure I know you're in this boat with me.
Oh, yeah.
That is, by the way, even more ugly than the CDI games, by the way, which I did actually forget to put on this list. I can't believe I forgot those games. When it comes to art styles, they are some of the craziest. But, of course, I am talking about Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, which are essentially... This is the funny bit. They are essentially uglified versions of Link's Awakening DX, which is a slightly better looking but still ugly version of the uglified version of Link to the Past. We are many layers deep into the onion of ugliness at this point.
We are lost in the sauce.
For the 500th time on this channel, we will now, beg Nintendo for, a redesign of the Oracle games, please. We would like a reboot. Thank you. Okay, on to another year. Well, so 1 year later, this was, and this was, of course, the arrival of my personal favourite Zelda game, Wind Waker, that can simply be summed up as I think it's the best distillation of the Toon Link art style. I think when people think of Toon Link, most people will gravitate towards thoughts of Wind Waker.
Definitely, yeah.
I think its art style can actually be summed up in one single word, boys. Do either of you know what that word might be? Just one word.
Awesome.
I'll take it. That's not the word I'm looking for. The word is swirls.
Oh,
swirl.
Oh, yeah.
Swirls.
There's a lot.
You name it. Wind Waker put a little swirl on it and made it look real cute. You take Toon Link, you take everything else and you put a swirl on it, and bing bang boom, you've got Wind Waker. There you are. Remaining within 2002, we have Four Swords. And though it is one of my least favourite games to play, the Toon Link to the Past art style collaboration is what I believe to be actually one of the best looking art styles in my opinion. Link to the Past's overworld with Toon Link, it's, like I say, I actually really quite, although I might not be the biggest fan of the game, I actually really like the art style. On to 2004. Of course, we've got one of the lesser known Zelda games. I'm not sure if you boys have heard of this one. This is Navi Trackers. Essentially, it was Wind Waker's art style,
right?
But they used Four Swords engine. So the art style can't really be commented on as it, like I say, it did really adopt it from Wind Waker, and then obviously combine that with the even higher bar of entry when it comes to playing it than Four Swords, because you have to own a Japanese GameCube to be able to play it. Unfortunately, probably one of the most unplayable Zelda games, not because of its actual gameplay, but because you have to own a Japanese GameCube, the cables, the Game Boys. This was an addition onto Four Swords. So again, it's unfortunately rendered essentially redundant, but I thought it was worth a mention. We're remaining within 2004 though, with one of the more popular 2D or 2.5D Zelda games, the Minish Cap, which is essentially it's essentially an artistic inversion of Four Swords. Where Four Swords was a three-dimensional expression of what was originally a 2D game, Minish Cap was a two-dimensional expression of what was originally a 3D game, if you're still with me. Capcom took the Toon Link art style and ran with it, making what is to some the best-looking 2D game in the Zelda franchise. It's incredibly vibrant, very distinctive, very approachable. It's my recommendation often to people when they ask, oh, what is a good place to start when it comes to the Zelda series? 2 years later, 2006 we're now in, and it's time for, I'm going to say it, boys, it's time for the moody teenager of the Zelda series. Do we have any idea what that might be, boys?
Is it Twilight Princess?
It's Twilight Princess! Yeah, Twilight Princess, which it took... now, correct me if I'm wrong, boys, but in my opinion, it took Ocarina of Time's skeleton and Wind Waker's, eccentricity, and basically combined them to forge what was essentially an apology for how warm and cutesy Wind Waker was.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
Spot on.
It can be cited as one of the largest artistic influences also for games like Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
So some, including the two boys that I'm sat with, would describe Twilight Princess as probably the most quintessential artistic portrayal of Hyrule to date.
I'd probably say so, maybe, yeah.
I'd agree. Yeah. I would agree.
I would like to quickly just throw in, very quick, Wind Waker, that art style will age well for the rest of time.
Yes, I could see that happening.
I think that's been proven as well, because I think the general consensus surrounding that game since its release has only got better and better.
Yes, for sure.
It was really quite terrible when it came out, but it has managed to recover a lot of its standing with the Zelda fans.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Of course, moving on, we also have Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. I mean, that was essentially a rasterized version of Wind Waker's art style, so again, not too much can be said about that. Link's Crossbow Training.
Banger. Again,
that just sort of continued Twilight Princess's art style, but again, not too much can be said about that. But then, boys, a shift happened. The time for imitation and continuation was over, and so dawned the age of Tingle. There was a plethora of bohemian Tingle spin-off titles, such as there was Dekasuki Tingle, Tingle's Balloon Fight DS, but yes, most infamously, as Ed mentioned, the duo of games freshly picked, Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land, and the subsequent sequel, Ripened. Tingle's Balloon Trip of Love.
I forgot about that.
It's one for the family.
Yeah, that is it. That's a deep one. So they both definitely take the cake for most schizophrenic title in the series. I don't know if you boys have played those games, but they essentially combined the Toon Link style with the, I think, suitably chaotic style of WarioWare. It is a nuts art style. And I think they're most notable for having some of the most insane looking designed characters, even more so than some of Twilight Princess's NPCs, featuring the likes of Old Man Nutsack McGemface, aka I think he was called Uncle Rupee in the game, and the infamous Pinkle, who has two very large ears. Anyway, moving back to normality, with the release of 2011's Skyward Sword. That Ed was talking about not too long ago. It's known for being, like I said, an amalgam of all of the precursing Zelda styles, basically. You can probably see a little bit of each game within it. It's not regarded as one of the best looking games ever made. It's like I say, I've never met anyone who considers it to be ugly.
Yeah.
I don't know about you boys.
I don't think so. I think it is just like the mid. It's the mediocre for a lot of people.
And I think that's it. It was a safe artistic choice. It committed the sin of sitting on the fence, so there wasn't anything to object to, but there also wasn't anything to praise.
It's hard to hate, hard to love.
Like we mentioned earlier, where Wind Waker caught heat for being different, Skyward Sword caught heat for not being different enough. So, like I say, the Zelda team must be just pulling their hair out, wondering what on earth do these people want. They can't win either way. Now, here's a deep cut for you boys that I'd forgotten about.
Okay.
And again, I don't know if either of you boys have played this, but it's The Legend of Zelda Battle Quest. Do you guys remember this? This was released back on the Wii U. And for those of you that haven't played it, it was a multiplayer minigame that proved that there can be sometimes beauty within chaos, as it managed to bridge the aesthetic gap between the world of Hyrule and Miitopia. A collaboration that absolutely no one asked for, but we absolutely needed. I am being a little bit facetious, as many Zelda fans won't even have heard of this, let alone played it. But actually, if you go and take, we'll throw it up on screen, but if you actually take a look at the gameplay of Battle Quest, you'll see that actually you can trace some of Breath of the Wild's combat and enemy design back to this game, and even Link's Awakening's art style was heavily influenced by this game. One of the lesser known additions in the world of Zelda. actually one of the biggest influences for Link's Awakening's art style. And like I say, you do even see quite a bit of Breath of the Wild in there too. Then of course, Breath of the Wild in 2017, and subsequently, obviously, Tears of the Kingdom in 2023, which have what is arguably one of the most inoffensive, please all, vanilla art styles. But again, just like Skyward Sword, you couldn't call it ugly, but I wouldn't say it broke any boundaries. But at the same time, is probably one of the most universally pleasant Zelda games to look at, particularly Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, of course, in the sky and everything.
Yeah, watching the sunset, it is one of the most aesthetically pleasing. With Ocarina of Time, you could call it polygonal. With Wind Waker, you could call it swirls.
Yeah.
With Twilight Princess, you could call it a moody teenager. With Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, there's
no through line that you can just describe,
And of course, obviously precursing Breath of the Wild was Hyrule Warriors. Feel free to correct me, boys, but I would describe Hyrule Warriors style as like twink maxed rendition of Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, that's
basically.
Exactly what I was just thinking.
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
And then basically, Age of Calamity simply borrowed, the Breath of the Wild design language. And then, of course, Age of Imprisonment will be mirroring the Tears of the Kingdom.
Yes, for sure.
And then we have every single Zelda game. I might have missed one or two. I'm sure that the comments will waste no time in promptly saying, you didn't talk, you're not going to talk about this then. The comments can never be satiated, but I certainly did my best, boys.
Did your best indeed, Johnny, mate.
You've done very well there.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming to my TED Talk, boys. I'll let you wrap things up, Eddie boy.
Oh, cheers, mate. Right, well, that was our argument for a few, if not all, of which game has the best art style.
So I think in conclusion, what we can say is it's Twilight Princess, isn't it, really?
Yes, Twilight
I mean, it's
Princess.
gotta be.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is.
Oh, guys,
Okay.
let's go and record the next video. It's definitely about Twilight Princess.
See you later, boys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Like and subscribe.
Yes, do it. We're almost at the 1,000 subscriber mark.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.
All right, see you later.